This video is on the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2a. The steps for solving a quadratic function using the quadratic formula are: number 1, label your a, b, and c. You might have to put your quadratic function into standard form first. Standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to plug in or substitute your values for a, b, and c using parentheses. After that, your last step is you solve the quadratic formula. Numerous things can happen when solving the quadratic formula. Since multiple things can happen, there's going to be 4 different examples. Remember in the previous video, we talked about the discriminant. The discriminant plays an extremely important role in what happens with this formula. So I'm first going to label my a, b, and c. This is already in standard form. My a is 3, my b is negative 4, and my c is negative 5. So I'm going to plug everything in to my quadratic formula. So negative b, so we put a negative outside in parentheses. My b is negative 4, close parentheses, plus or minus the square root. And inside the square root, we have b squared minus 4ac. So my a is 3 and my c is negative 5. Make sure to watch your signs and put everything in parentheses. And all of that is over 2a. So now I'm going to solve this, and we kind of got to break it down piece by piece. So I'm first going to look at this negative 4. A negative times a negative becomes a positive, and 4 times 1 is 4, plus or minus the square root. So looking in my square root sign, we have negative 4 squared. So negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16. Once I do that, we're going to break down this piece right here. We have a negative 4 times 3 times negative 5. So negative 4 times 3 is a negative 12 times negative 5, which would give us a positive 60. Then we make our fraction bar and we do what's underneath. 2 times 3 is 6. So now we're going to simplify the square root further. So we have a positive 4 plus or minus the square root of 76 over 6. Okay, now to simplify the 76, the square root of 76, you're going to use simplifying radicals that you learned in class. If I simplify the square root of 76, it simplifies to 4 plus or minus 2 radical 19 over 6. Again, that's because this breaks into 4 times 19. The square root of 4 is 2. Again, you're to learn that in class. Okay, the last thing, so that we finally have our answer, we look at this and we go, can I simplify this any further? And in this case, we can. 4, 2, and 6 all have a 2 in common. So we're going to look at this way, and they all have a 2 in common. So if they all have a 2 in common, we're going to divide everything by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, and you don't actually have to write your 1. So the square root of 19. All of that over 6 divided by 2 of 3. So ultimately, we just took 4 over 6 and reduced it, and 2 over 6 and reduced it, but we left it combined as 1. So your answer to this quadratic is x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 19 over 3. Example number 2. Y equals x squared plus 4x minus 12. Remember, anytime that there's not a number in front of a variable, it's really an imaginary one. So my A is 1, my B is 4, and my C is negative 12. So looking at this, I use my quadratic formula. X equals negative B, which is 4, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. My A is 1 and my C is negative 12, and all of that is over 2A. So again, we're going to simplify it piece by piece. So I'm going to have negative 4 plus or minus, and in parentheses, or not parentheses, under the square root, we have 4 squared, which is 16. And then we're going to take negative 4 times 1, which would give me a negative 4, times negative 12, which gives me a positive 48. And all of that is over 2 times 1, which is 2. Now we simplify the square root further. So we have a negative 4 plus or minus 16 plus 48 is 64. All of that over 2. The square root of 64, it's a perfect square, which means the square root of 64 is 8. So I'm going to go negative 4 plus or minus 8 over 2. What happens here, because it's a perfect square, we can actually simplify this completely to the end. So we break this off into 2 sections, and we're going to have negative 4 plus 8 over 2 and negative 4 minus 8 over 2. Because the plus or minus means that there's 2 answers. You have to add 8 and subtract 8. So negative 4 plus 8 is a positive 4 over 2, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. And down here we have negative 4 minus 8, which is a negative 12 over 2, which is a negative 6. So x equals 2 and negative 6. What that means is if we were to graph this function, it would cross the x-axis at 2 and negative 6. Example 3. We have y equals x squared plus 6x plus 9. First step is label our a, b's, and c's. So a, again, is 1, b is positive 6, and c is positive 9. So we have our quadratic formula of x equals negative b, which is 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and all of that is over 2 times a, which is 1. So now we go ahead and we solve this. So negative times positive is a negative 6, plus or minus inside 6 squared is 36. And then we're going to go negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4 times 9. So negative 4 times 9 is a negative 36. All of that over 2. Now I simplify inside the radical. So if I simplify inside the radical, I have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. The square root of 0 is 0. So ultimately, that whole piece goes away, and I have negative 6 over 2. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So x equals negative 3. What this means is that if we graphed this quadratic, the vertex would be at negative 3 on the x-axis. Example 4. We're going to start by labeling our A, B's, and C's. So A is 4, B is 1, and C is 2. So our formula is x equals negative b, b is 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So now we're going to simplify this. When I simplify this, negative times positive is a negative 1, plus or minus 1 squared is 1, and then negative 4 times 4 is a negative 16, times 2 is a negative 32 over 2 times 4, which is 8. We simplify inside the radical, giving us negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 31 over 8. You guys have not learned what a negative inside a radical means, but pretty much it gives you an imaginary number. What we're going to say is that x equals 2 non-real solutions. If you were to type a negative into the calculator, a negative square root, you would end up getting something that says non-real. So anytime there's a negative under a radical sign, it is 2 non-real solutions. This concludes all of our examples. Now it's your turn to try some. Number 1 is y equals x squared plus 8x plus 16. And number 2 is y equals x squared minus 4x minus 24.